Hello guys, it's 15th September and let's check today's newspaper. What is there? So the first headline is Hindi is not a competitor of regional languages, says Amit Shah. They depend on each other for the growth, says Minister. Union Home Minister Amit Shah said on Wednesday that only 6% of the children received education in English and a large majority who did not speak fluent English were deprived of a platform at the national and state levels. Mr. Shah appealed to guardians to speak children in their mother tongue to enable them to learn Hindi without much effort. He said it was time that inferiority complex around the Indian languages instilled by the British was overthrown from people's conscience with the help of regional languages and Hindi. Mr. Shah said Hindi was not a competitor but a friend of all the other regional languages in the country and they were mutually dependent on each other for their growth. False campaign. He said there was a concerted disinformation campaign to pit Hindi against other languages such as Marathi and Tamil and underlined the need to strengthen local languages with Hindi. Addressing the All India Official Language Conference in Surat uh, on Hindi Divas, Mr. Shah said that accepting the coexistence of languages was necessary and stressed the need to make Hindi flexible by talking words from other languages to expand its dictionary. Mr. Shah observed that unless the Hindi language become flexible, it could not grow. I want to make one thing very clear. Some people are spreading disinformation, he said, disinformation that Hindi and Gujarati, Hindi and Tamil, Hindi and Marathi are competitors. Hindi cannot be a competitor to any language in the country. You must understand that Hindi is the friend of all languages of the country. Mr. Shah said that. Let's now go to the editorial page. Engage with caution. The latest disengagement along LAC as a line of actual control is a welcome step, but the border crisis is not over. India and China on September 13 confirmed the disengagement of their troops from a fifth friction point in eastern Ladakh along the LAC, with the latest withdrawal of troops from patrolling point 15 PP15 in the Gogra hot spring area. Buffer zones have now been established by the two sides in five locations, including in Galwan Valley, north and south of Pangong Lake, and at PP17A in Gogra. The arrangements in the four earlier established buffer zones have so far helped keep the peace over the past 2 years. No patrolling is to be undertaken by either sides in the buffer zones, which have been established on territory claimed by both India and China. The latest disengagement came just 3 days before the Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping are to attend the SCO summit in Uzbekistan, reflecting the current state of the relations. The two leaders have not directly spoken in more than 2.5 years, an extraordinary situation for the world's two most populous countries. Whether they meet at the SCO summit as of September 14, neither side had confirmed or ruled out a meeting or at the G20 in the Indonesia later this year. India will need to proceed with cautions as it inevitably resumes high level engagement with China. While the buffer zones may serve as a temporary measure to prevent a recurrence of clashes, the reality is that this is an arrangement that has been forced on India. The Indian military, by holding the line and showing its capacity to match China's deployments, has been able to reserve China's multiple territorial ingress of April 2020 in five areas. That has, however, come at the cost of India's ability to access patrolling points that it was reaching previously, which, in the view of some military observers, might have been China's game plan all along, given the favorable logistics and terrain on the Chinese side that enable faster deployments. Moreover, China has neither agreed to resolve standoffs in Demchok and Dipsang suggesting they predated the current tensions nor shown any tend to de-escalate. Instead, continuing to sorry for the dogs barking. Instead, continuing to build forward infrastructure aimed at permanently housing a large number of troops closer to the LAC. Indeed, signs are that both sides are in for prolonged period of uncertainty on the borders, thanks to China's decision to mobilize tens of thousands of troops in April 2020 and contravention of past border agreements, unless Beijing reverses its recent and still unexplained moves to militarize the LAC and in the process undo the carefully constructed arrangements that helped keep the peace for 40 years. India will have little incentive to consider a return to a relation as they were prior to 2020. The latest disengagements, while certainly a welcome step, by no means implies an end to the crisis on the border. Let's go to another one. The future of old time. Near a universal social security pension would be a good start to radical expansion of public support for the elderly. So it's about the pension to the elderly people. Life expectancy in India has more than doubled since independence from around 32 years in the late 40s to 70 years or so today. Many countries have done even better, but this is still a historical achievement. Over the same period, the fertility rate has crashed from about 6 children per woman to just 2, liberating women from the shackles of repeated childbearing and childcare. All this is good news, but it so creates a challenge: the aging of the population. The share of the elderly person persons aged 60 years and above in India's population is close to 9% in 2011, was close to 9% in 2011, is growing fast and may reach 18% by 2036, according to the National Commission on Population. If India is to ensure a decent equality of life for the elderly in the near future, planning and providing for it must begin today. Pension help. Recent work on mental health among the elderly in India sheds new light on their dire predicament. Evidence on the depression from a collaborative la- survey of the Abdul Latif Jameel Poverty Action Lab (JPL) and the government of Tamil Nadu is particularly telling among persons aged 60 and above 30% to 50%, depending on gender and age group, had symptoms that make them likely to be depressed. The proportion with the depression symptom is much higher for women than men and rise sharply with age. In most cases, depression remains undiagnosed and untreated, as one might expect. Oh shit. As one night express depression as is strongly correlated with the poverty and poor health, but also with the loneliness among the elderly living alone in the Tamil Nadu sample. 74% had symptoms that they would classify them as likely to be the mildly depressed or worse on the short-term geriatric depression scale. A large majority of elderly persons living alone are women, mainly widows. The hardship of old age are not related to poverty alone, but some cash often helps. Cash can certainly help to cope with many health issues and sometimes to avoid loneliness as well. The first step towards a dignified life for the elderly is to protect them from destitution and all the deprivations that may come with it. That is why old age pensions are a vital part of social security systems around the world. India has important schemes of non-contributory pensions for the elderly, widowed women, and disabled person under the National Social Assistance Program. NSAP, administered by Ministry of Rural Development (LS), as eligibility for NSAP is restricted to BPL families based on so the pension would only be benefited by BPL families. Based on outdated and unreliable BPL list, some of them are 20 years old. Further, the Central Council, some of them are 20 years old. Further, the contribution to the old age pensions under NSAP has stagnated at a tiny 200 rupees 200 per month since 2006. Rupees 200 is nothing, and in today's inflation period, with a slightly higher but still paltry amount 300 per month for widows, many states have enhanced the coverage and or amount of social security pensions beyond NSAP norms using their own funds and schemes. Uh, some have even achieved near universal, say 75 to 80% coverage of widows and elderly persons. That is now the norms. For instance, in all the southern states except Tamil Nadu, an old exception since Tamil Nadu has been a pioneer in the field of social security. Beyond targets, targeting social benefit is always difficult. Restricting them to BPL families has not worked well. There are huge exclusions errors in the BPL list when it comes to old age pensions. Targeting is not a good idea in any case. For one thing, targeting tends to be based on household rather than individual indicators. A widow or elderly person, however, may experience major deprivation even in a relatively well off household. A pension can help them to avoid extreme dependence on the relatives who may or may not take good care of them, and it may even lead relatives to be more considerate. For another, targeting tends to involve complicated formalities such as the submission of BPL certificates and other documents. That has certainly been the experience with NSAP pensions. The formality. Let's close it to here, and let's go to another article.